All right. We are talking about affirmations today. And I think a lot of people, when they hear the word affirmation, they think it's super woohoo and they're going to turn this off because people think it's just kind of weird and it doesn't work. So I think what we're going to do is talk about why it works, why it often doesn't work, and then the correct steps to take to ensure that it does work.
And I have to admit, I don't do what you find usually the type of affirmation. I don't do it like that. I do it though differently. So there's options to do it. It doesn't always
Interesting.
have to start with the I whatever. It actually doesn't. So
And it is a really interesting conversation because I think some of us who grew up at a certain time watching Saturday Night Live think of it as like, I'm going to speak to myself in the mirror. I am I am good. I am enough. Gosh darn it, people like me. It's not
it's not necessarily, for some people may work, for some don't. We're going to dig into that in this episode. I'm Heike Fallon, a personal high performance coach. I help my clients with self-leadership, their own self-leadership, because if you lead yourself well first with your health and your personal performance, you're going to rock the world.
Awesome. And I'm Shannon Passalacqua. I too am a high performance coach and I help women heal after miscarriages.
Yes, so let's go in.
Let's dive in.
Yeah. Affirmation, really what it is. Yes, it is positive statements. So it's a form of positive talk for sure. And the goal is usually to influence the brain, the subconsciousness, or actually I would say it's actually conscious right there because you're talking, right? And it's conscious in that moment, but to influence the brain. And I'm gonna throw right out some little science part here because I think that's important to cover, because there's I first thought too, it's like it doesn't work,
Well, I think when you know the science of why something works, it helps you understand why you should continue to do something. If you just think it's whatever, this is what pop psychology is telling me to do, then you're probably not going to continue doing it if you don't see benefit immediately. But if you know that there's science behind it, I think that just gives you more.
Oh, I like that word, pop psychology. I love that one. Yeah, so essentially, as far as we know to this date and my knowledge at this point of my all my reading, research, and knowledge accumulation, our brain, is when I'm talking like our brain tries to constantly predict what's going to happen. And the reason is because it's trying to keep us safe. That's the whole purpose of the brain, is we're navigating through days and life in order to stay safe. And for that, the brain predicts. And it uses all information from the external world to our eyes and ears and temperature and all that, as well as our internal world, which is called a interoception, so information coming from within. And it creates a prediction of what's going to happen. And then it will take action. So that's our behaviors or
respond appropriately.
Or responses.
Or not appropriately.
With the information it has, if I'm already thinking something negative, well, this isn't going to work. Guess what? My prediction is this isn't going to work. And then it actually makes me more behave and react in that direction. Now, if I say and truly believe, and this part is important, truly believe, you know what? I can figure this out. I will more likely go into with that mindset, and more likely my prediction slightly shifts, and then my response and behavior might be slightly different, especially when it comes to challenges. So because of the brain predicts, the affirmation essentially is just one other input in the big picture. So I'm getting all information from the external world, all information from the internal world, in that self-talk is information from the internal world of my thinking and my actually talking thinking, because I'm hearing it too. So it actually is a combined one. I'm thinking it and I'm hearing it when I'm saying it out loud. So it's another added information that changes how my prediction might happen. And this prediction, by the way, we don't know. Even a prediction like me looking at the screen right now, my brain is predicting. I'm not thinking about what I'm thinking when I'm looking at the screen. So we're talking predictions happen all the time without us really knowing.
Well, and I think what's important to know as well is your brain believes what you tell it.
Yep.
And so very often we can get into a loop, right, of negative self-talk, or when a string of negative things happen to us in our life, at the same time, we can get into a negative spiral and we keep telling ourselves negative things. And so that changes our neuroplasticity, right? That changes the wires in our brain and the grooves in our brain, and we kind of become a more negative thinker. The opposite is true as well. We can tell ourselves positive things, and our brain will believe it. So we can change the neuroplasticity, the grooves in our brain, and tell ourselves that positive things are going to happen. And I use this like simply in my workouts, right? Like if I'm struggling, if I'm having a hard day and I'm lifting hard, if I tell myself this is really hard, it's going to be really hard. But I catch myself and say, okay, I can do this. I know I can do this. I'm strong. Now, does that mean I'm going to lift 20 pounds heavier at that moment? No, probably not. But I can convince myself that I can do this. I can do it. And it's going to set the stage for later on, so that when I do keep coming back to these workouts or do keep showing up, my brain has now changed and tells itself that, yes, I am strong. I can do these things. And the same goes for all parts of our lives.
I love that, because I tell my client always, it's like working out, right? Like if you learn a sport, you start off and let's say pickleball, right? You like, since that's such a popular sport nowadays, but it can be any sport, but you start off and it's, you're feeling a little awkward because you're focusing and you're trying to get it. And with time you get better, because your brain created the neural connection it needs to do this. And the same way you learn movements in sports, you also get neural connection with your thinking, with your thoughts. So when you are thinking and more, let me say, positive mindset, because randomly telling yourself positive things may work if you do it repetitive enough. But the fact is that if you're not believing it,
Right.
it doesn't matter what you say, because it's the same way as somebody else tells you what to do and you don't necessarily believe it. But even if you say I can do it, but you're not feeling that you can do it, then it's not going to work. So the question is then, how do we do this?
Right. And that's what I was going to say. It also means that you need to be consistent with it.
Yes, consistency is one big one, because it comes back to like the same as you train a sport, right? Consistency matters. Or playing guitar. If you practice once a month, guess what? You're not going to get a whole lot better, right? But if you play every other day or every day just a little bit, you're forming those neural connections much faster and you're getting much faster, better at it. So yes, the positive mindset. So consistency matters. And I think you have to believe that there is a shift happening. If you believe that no positive talk can do anything, yeah, affirmation won't work for you if you don't believe.
Well, it's like a gratitude journal, right? If you're just sitting down and writing and like, oh yeah, I'm grateful, blah, 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 and then you just move on, the gratitude journal is not going to work. The same thing goes for positive affirmations. Oh yeah, I'm smart and da, da, and you tell yourself this. It's not going to work unless you're actually focusing on it.
Correct.
Now, I have a question.
Sure.
Do you think that it's more beneficial to write these things out, to write your affirmations, your positive affirmations?
Well, there's research out that when we actually write with the handwriting, because of the act of moving your hand and the fine coordination that's needed for that.
And the input.
That is another strong input to the brain. And we do know if we combine inputs, it makes a faster, stronger connection.
Neural connection.
It's kind of like also when we know when we walk and do certain exercise at the same time has a stronger input. So thinking and writing out these affirmations can be a little, obviously it's one of those things we don't feel, but can be a stronger change and faster change for some people, for sure. So there's definitely a big component of handwriting in the whole thing.
Mhm. So that,
Which
again, goes
unfortunately
back.
we've gone away from, unfortunately.
Right. That's interesting, but it lends to the idea again of journaling and the importance of journaling,
Yep.
and writing things out. I always think that's fascinating, and I assume there's got to be some data out there to show that writing things out is definitely. I mean, I know there's a lot of data showing writing is and journaling is really good for you and getting your feelings out, which we'll talk at a different time. But yeah, I mean, I assume that would go for positive affirmations as well.
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, I have not like ever done like full steps of how to figure out affirmation. It kind of more with a positive mindset on things and just generally the belief I can figure things out. I
Yeah.
just, for me, it's always been like I didn't feel like I sometimes use the I phrase, I can do this, but I'm also utilizing oftentimes like, more like a, you know, let's figure this out. There got to be a way to do this. Not so
Mm-hmm,
much the
mm-hmm.
I have, I can do
I
this.
can do it.
I can figure this out. I'm throwing it more out like I'm like when I'm getting stuck or something like there gotta be a way, there
Mm-hmm,
gotta be a
mm-hmm.
way to do this. Like come on, focus, figure this out.
Well, I think it's important to say that what you touched on is, I can figure it out, and it's believing that you've always figured it out in the past. So, what are the steps I need to take to figure it out now?
Yeah.
We're fully capable of figuring things out.
So for me, I've used affirmations more like that in problem solving and figuring out things, or when I'm getting frustrated with, business or stuff like that, to
Mm-hmm,
to use it in that form more. But I have used it also with clients where we were a little more specific in the coaching, really going into, okay, what are your goals, where's your struggle,
mm-hmm.
where are the challenges and what areas do you want to change, and let it be, a lot of times it's self-confidence, right? A lot of times it works really well for that. And we are really in the sessions identified specific areas where that shows up and where
Mm-hmm.
it's needed, and being aware of the cues. When does that show up? When do I get that uncertainty and lack of self-confidence? And once to recognize these cues, then to actually implement a specific phrasing that we kind of, or the client with my help there creates and they're going to use. So it's
Right.
a little bit of process. No, it's not just randomly taking, a phrase from the internet or somebody else use it, but to really, because in that moment that person connects with it. It's really like it means something to them in that situation because they know why they want to overcome it. They know how they feel and what feeling they want to achieve. And so it's a very more strategic approach to figuring out how the affirmation should sound and when and
Mm-hmm.
how it should be used. So it's not the random one. Worse is so I know I haven't done that, but I know friends and also clients use specific affirmations every morning. So I don't know.
Well, and I want to be clear that affirmations aren't going to take like trauma away. It's not going to, for the women that I work with who've been through miscarriages, it's not going to take that pain away. It's not going to take the PTSD, the trauma, the grief away. What it can help with is what you were just talking about, which is, trying to figure out ways of, okay, how can I show up how can I heal? What are the steps that I can take to show up to heal, and how can I figure this out? And knowing that you're capable of getting through this and working through it and moving the grief through your body. And so I think that's a good distinction to make. Just saying, hey, you know, writing down like, oh, you know, I'm going to get pregnant, or whatever it is, like that's not going to be beneficial for you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it totally makes sense, because at the end of the day, it needs to really connect with you. And it's not, I see it also more, as you kind of mentioned, it's one puzzle piece that we
Right.
can utilize in order to make shifts and transformations in our life. It's not the only answer, but it can be a really good puzzle piece, and it's free.
Right. And that's the thing. And
I love that.
it's another good tool to have in your toolbox. And that's a lot of what we talk about, right?
Yeah.
Having all these different tools that you can turn to and say, okay, I can use this. But again, consistency is always very helpful with a lot of these things. So adding them on top to, you know, start with one thing.
Yep.
And do that consistently for a couple weeks, and then add another tool in and do that consistently for a couple weeks, and see what changes for you.
Yep. Because and if you're doing a lot of negative self-talk,
Mhm.
a little affirmation is just not
Right.
weighing against it enough. You really have to address the negative self-talk.
Right. Which is
It's
very
not like this
common for
fancy
my
fancy
right.
overlapping thing that will solve problems.
Right.
If you find yourself feeling you're really having a lot of negative self-talk, that needs to be addressed in.
Mhm.
And if it's, you know, somebody who's also maybe more depressed or other mental challenges, I always recommend do see a therapist, you know, do
Yeah.
address those issues and challenges in addition to it. Again, this is a puzzle piece. This is a tool that we can
Mhm.
integrate. But if there's a lot of negative self-talk and it's so manifested, it needs to be addressed. It can't be
Mhm.
just overlapped out of nowhere.
Right.
So
What are the steps to take to what are the correct steps to take for positive affirmations?
there's only one correct way, and that's finding your own.
So finding what works for you.
Finding what works for you is the
So
correct
some
way.
people talking into the mirror at themselves and saying these things to themselves every morning does work.
Yeah, so find your way. With all of these things, there is no correct way.
Mhm.
So there is, like I said, the options. You can use the first person, you can use the second person. Some people use their own names, you know.
Mhm.
I could get your shit together, you know, kind of thing. What's going on? Get it together.
Right. Right.
Um, so find what works for you. If it's talking in the mirror, seeing yourself, whatever you have to find your way. That is number one. So it's not about a strict thing, but it's I think one first step is, if you really want to make it a fair approach, knowing, not picking and like you said, start small, start with some really knowing, okay, this is one issue where I want to work on, this
Mhm.
is where I'm challenged, this is what keeps being a pattern and it shows up a lot. Really identifying your goal and where you and where you are aware of it and that you want to change. So have one area that you want to address, and then again, make it personal, make it that it fits for you. If it's be
Mhm.
in the morning, if it's when you recognize the cues, some people have that awareness and recognize it. Other people don't even realize until later. So they may need to just, you know, have have an alarm go off, whatever it be.
Which I always think is a good tool to use. You know, if you guys are forgetting to do certain things, or put an alarm on your
Yeah,
phone,
that's
and
what I use.
you can label your alarms. I wonder, if doing these things at night while you're falling asleep would help reprogram and help the neuroplasticity even more.
We do know, like, right before, whatever we think right before we sleep, the brain works very differently on. So absolutely, yeah. Like, actually, last thing you're gonna think about, that could be a very positive. That's actually a good thought. I hadn't even thought about that one. So that's
Yeah, because
one.
sometimes that's when we start thinking about our stressful things. So again, maybe if you're thinking about stressful things at night, jot those down, put them in your journal so they're not in your brain anymore. And then when you're falling asleep, repeat to yourself those positive thoughts, whatever it is that you're trying to change, and that can lend to changing those grooves in your brain. And again, we're trying to change our brain. We're trying to change the neuroplasticity of our brain, and that's going to take time.
Oh,
We're
totally.
changing the connections,
Yep.
and that takes time and effort. So don't give up, because after a week, it's not
Yeah.
working. It takes time, just like
Yeah.
what we said
Yeah.
earlier. It's like learning how to play a new sport, learning a new, I don't know, learning how to knit. It's going to
Playing
take
guitar, you
time.
don't learn in 1 week. Not happening.
Right. So
So
you're changing things in your brain, and that takes effort.
it takes effort, takes time. And another step really is, as we mentioned before, you need to believe it. It,
Mhm.
it, it needs to be realistic for you, and you got to believe it. So, like I said, sometimes phrasing it in a way very specific might be helpful. Like, when, let's say, um, like, say a task is really hard, and I believe I can't do this task, right? Instead of just going, oh, I can do this task, I
I
can
could
get,
do it.
I can do it, kind of go like, I know how to get started, keeping it
Mm,
smaller, or I know my first step, what I need to do,
mm,
and and
mhm,
and really narrow it down, and keeping it kind of small and specific sometimes, for somebody who has a hard time making that shift to using affirmations. Somebody who's been doing it already, and felt the great impact of it, that I would challenge to change it up a little bit.
right. Yeah.
Because sometimes we may repeat things just out of, habit, and
Habit. Mhm.
not getting that full connection anymore. And another great way to create a little stronger connection to the affirmation is actually visualizing it. So that would be like,
That was,
if
yeah.
we,
How did we get this far and not talk about visualization?
because there's always lots of component of things, but visualizing, the outcome. And if you're not able to visualize the outcome, or the positive shift, then you have to make it much smaller, or it's definitely a little sign, would be for me as a coach, that's an area to dig deeper,
Mhm.
gaining more clarity, what's going on, what's holding
I
you.
mean, they talk about this all the time, again, when it comes to sports, like visualize you kicking the ball in a certain way, or visualize your swing, and they've seen so many positive things from that. And so that goes to what we're talking about too, like visualize where you want to be, what you want to do,
And
how you
it
want to show
takes
up.
And the reason why that is so powerful too is because I said in the very beginning, our brain tries to predict.
Mhm.
And the more clarity it has, and the more it actually has a visual picture of how things are going to look, it can predict better.
I love that.
Because at the end of the day, we're creating all this. Our,
Right.
our world is all wildly created from in here, which is creepy. But but visualization is a really great tool. And as you mentioned already, it comes back to consistency. And you have to line up. Those are a couple steps or guidelines, or starting points, what I would suggest. Like I said, there is no right or wrong. It
Right.
matters of finding what works for you, but
Mhm.
it does impact the brain. and it has a can
It
have
isn't all just woohoo science. It
no,
isn't, it is woohoo. It actually does work.
and also I've been using also myself as well as with clients EFT, which is the tapping, right, where you tap different spots, right,
Mhm.
along, and you follow. You can do it yourself with the talking, or there's apps now.
Oh, I didn't
There's
know that.
yeah,
Cool.
the tapping app. Yeah, I can actually leave that below too. Some
Oh, that
information,
would be great.
but I've used it for falling asleep and
Oh,
letting go of thoughts.
I use it for pain management.
And for pain management, exactly. So there's lots of ways, but that's another way of, affirmation, doing a tapping technique. So that's a whole nother ball game where we enter also stimulating different,
Mhm.
the facial nerve, and there's lots of other things involved, and it does can have a great impact too. Research is more experimental research in there rather than other research so far, but it works for anybody
Mhm.
who
Believes.
believes it and makes a change. That's, again, if you don't believe this has any impact on your brain, it won't.
Right.
Because then
Right.
if you're
But
not
then
open,
you're
if
not
you're
changing your brain. You're
if you're not open that your brain can change, it won't change.
right.
It doesn't matter. But if EFT is the tapping is another tool that I use, and it's a form of affirmation. And then popular was also, I know, a lot of people use that high five in the mirror thing
Yeah,
from
I think
from
Mel
Mel Robbins.
Robbins.
Yep.
Actually, I did that for a long time and I had my stepdaughter doing that for a while too. And I thought it was very helpful.
Yeah. So
I never got into the habit of doing it. I did it a few times, but it was a good way to start the day.
yeah, so there's lots of other ways to integrate it for yourself. So I personally like the tapping, like I said,
Mhm.
fiving yourself in the mirror
In the mirror.
might
Yeah.
be a way to go. So anyways, I think
Yeah. I
that's
like
from
that.
my side on this topic, which I think is fascinating, because until years ago, I didn't even think about it much. And
No, I didn't.
how powerful it is.
Well, how powerful our thoughts are
Oh, totally. Totally. So
and
so
how we can change them. We can do that ourselves. We don't have to rely on outside forces. We can change our inner dialogue and what we're telling ourselves.
just keep it consistent and keep practicing. Hope this topic helped every viewer today and you took something from this, and that might be one puzzle piece that changes your life.
Awesome. All right. Well, we'll see you guys later.
Bye-bye.
Bye.